I want to continue now talking about word choice because choosing your words carefully is one of the most important things that you do as a writer. Let's start off by talking about denotation and connotation. Denotation is what you will find when you look a word up in the dictionary. It's what it literally means. This is opposed to connotation. Connotation is the meaning that comes from attitudes that people have about certain words. In other words, how does that word make people feel, or how are they affected by that word? Let's look at some examples. The words enthusiasm, passion, and obsession all have about the same denotation or dictionary meaning, but their connotations are very different. An enthusiasm is a pleasurable and absorbing interest. A passion has a strong emotional component, and it can affect someone positively or negatively. An obsession is an unhealthy attachment that excludes other interests. So you can see each one of these words is very different when it comes to connotation. So if you're writing, you need to choose the word very carefully. And it's important to choose words carefully so that you say exactly what you want to say, exactly how you want to say it. Now let's talk about general and specific language. Writers who are effective balance general words, which is those that name groups or classes, with specific words, those that identify individual and particular things. You don't want all of your words to be general or all of your words to be specific. You want to have a balance. It's going to make your writing much more interesting. Abstractions are a type of general words, and they refer to things we can't perceive through our five senses. This would be emotions or ideas, something like that. Specific words are often concrete, naming things we can see, hear, touch, taste, or smell. Think about specific things: chair, car, coffee, donut, bed, wall, house. These are all things that we can experience with our senses. They're also naming specific things. Now let's take a look in this little chart of examples of general and specific language. Here's our first example, a general word, book. We can make it a little bit less general by saying a dictionary. That's a specific kind of book. We can get even more specific by saying an abridged dictionary, a certain type of dictionary. And very specific by saying my 2004 edition of the American Heritage College Dictionary. That's pretty specific. Now, let's look at the difference between abstract and concrete. So we're going to start with an abstract concept, culture. We can make it a little bit less abstract by saying visual art. We can make it concrete by saying painting. And even more concrete by being specific about a painting, in this example, Van Gogh's Starry Night. So this is how we can go from general to specific, from abstract to concrete. And writing needs to have a mixture of these things in order to be as effective as it needs to be. Now let's take a moment to talk about figurative language. Figurative language is figures of speech, and what it does is paint pictures in the minds of your readers so they can see a point that you're trying to make very clearly. And word choice is so important in making this happen. Now, some might consider figurative language to be frilly or just something fancy that you could add on to your writing. But in reality, using this type of language is crucial to helping your readers understand what you're trying to say. Because sometimes you can use figurative language and in one or two words say something that without the use of that language might take sentences and paragraphs to explain. One type of figurative language that it's useful to be adept with is similes. Similes use like, as, or sometimes as if or as though to make explicit the comparison between two things that are very different. For example, the comb felt as if it was raking my skin off. Now, it wasn't really doing that, but that's what it felt like to the writer, and he used a simile to help us, the reader, understand what that felt like. Now let's look at metaphors. Metaphors are more implicit. They don't use words like or as. It just says one thing is another thing. For example, the internet is the new town square. We're not using like or as. We're just saying that the internet is this other thing that it's clearly not really the new town square. But since the town square is where people would meet, they would get their news, they would pass on information to other people, a lot of times that's what we use the internet for. So that metaphor works very, very well. Now we also have to look at analogies. Analogies compare similar features of two dissimilar things. And in doing this, they're able to explain something that's unfamiliar by relating it to something that is familiar. Let's look at this example. The mouse genome is the Rosetta Stone for understanding the language of life. Now this is an analogy because it compares something that we don't understand, the mouse genome, with something that we are familiar with, the Rosetta Stone. So we can understand better what the writer is trying to say when he uses features of two things that are very different to show us how they're actually also very alike. Now, a cliche is an overused figure of speech. And I give the example, busy as a bee. It's been said many, many times to the point that everybody knows it and it's tired and old. And we all use cliches all the time, especially when we're speaking. And some work very well when we're trying to get an idea across. But you want to avoid using them too much in your writing because readers might think that what you're saying isn't really very interesting, and it can also make you come across as very insincere, like you're not taking your topic very seriously. You want to avoid mixed metaphors because they're going to make comparisons that really don't work. Let's look at some examples here. The lectures were like brilliant comets streaking through the night sky, showering listeners with a torrential rain of insight. Now we've got streaking light and heavy rain. These don't really go together. But if we change up the sentence a little bit to say something like this, the lectures were like brilliant comets streaking through the night sky, dazzling listeners with flashes of insight. Now all of our images relate to light, and it's going to be a consistent metaphor. We haven't mixed our metaphors. It's nice, clear comparisons. So let me reiterate how important word choice is. You have to be careful to choose your words when you write so that you exactly say what you want to say. And I think you'll find this makes a lot of difference.